Hello, friends. This is the Connected Approach podcast, the world's number one podcast for connected leaders. I'm Chris Curtin.
And I'm Amanda White. Welcome to your warm embrace. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing well, doing well. What's
Good.
uh, what's on top of mind for us to talk about today?
Well, I think I know that's a tongue twister, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I have it written down and I can't say it.
I think what is a good topic for us to talk about today is just staying focused on the goal. When we think about ourselves as leaders, leading others, leading circumstances, just how we can be our best self, having that goal of what is it that you're working towards and staying clear on that. Because what's kind of brought this top of mind for me today is I've just been in a number of conversations, whether it's been with a coaching client or even just with friends or previous colleagues, where you can just kind of get into all these like paths of like noise or distractions or drama or this or that, that are easy to go down. But you have to be able to say, wait a minute, what's the goal here? Like, how is it that I want to be, and what is it that I want? So I'll stop there, but that's just top of mind because I've been in a number of conversations and just even thinking about myself as well. And I know it's probably very relevant, right, with what you have going on. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of thoughts on that, and I'm sure there are categories of this, right? I mean, certainly to your executive clients, there are finite business goals for them that they are attempting to remain focused on, right? As one of my
Right.
favorite leaders used to say, the point on the horizon. What is that real point that we're trying to head toward, especially when there are all the daily fires and
Right.
and challenges of a business environment. If you're in business, you're looking to do something hard,
Right.
and well, right? Trying to do something hard and well and meaningful
Right.
for your clients, for your partners, for your customers. And you and I have a background in aerospace industry, and of course we know the
Yeah.
depths of what hard is. When we would take a look at some of the products that we were a part of by virtue of those businesses, and having to shake our
Right.
heads as our respective business and liberal arts majors and say, wait a minute, these things are this close together and they don't touch, or these things can heat up and go into the air and be safe, etc. And just think about the remarkable nature of what can go wrong, what does go wrong every day, and
Mm-hmm.
and for leaders to still remain focused on the goal. So there's like the
Right.
business goal, then there are the
Right.
personal goals
Yeah.
of what you want to achieve for yourself, what the client wants to achieve for themselves. And you and I then get into the nitty gritty of who do you want to be in this circumstance,
Right.
right? We've had leader clients who have gotten through a challenge and really have professionally achieved for the business, personally achieved great results for themselves, and yet been like, oh, that wasn't who I wanted to be in that
Right.
circumstance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
they,
and
whether
I
they
think,
had left too many, too many people who maybe they had not related to, or circumstances they had not treated in the way
hmm
that they wanted to.
yeah,
And then there's like the life goal or life end game, which,
yeah,
gets much more existential, but, is a very interesting conversation as well. One of my personal heroes is comedian Jerry Seinfeld. And so he says he's
hmm
been studying the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius recently about Stoicism
Yeah.
and meditations, and the fact that one of his favorite things is that everything that we have, everything we're worried about, all the interplay that we're worried about, all of the stressors are going to be gone like that.
Yeah. So what's it for, right? Like a lot of times I'll say, like for what? Like is this really all that important in the grand scheme of things? So when we talk about goal or even end game, I mean some of the exercises that I've taken people through is, really think about, that end of life, what someone is saying about your eulogy or at your eulogy, right? Which is like, well, I don't want to think about that. But it's like, well, just take a minute and think about that. Like, what do you want people saying at your eulogy? Like, who do you want to be there? And I think where the nuances come in too is
Oh,
are you
just a moment on that, because there's a fine line, and I think it's important for for our audience and for us to talk about your what is this for is
mm-hmm,
about helpfulness,
mm-hmm,
not helplessness. It's not about being helpless, not saying, what is it all for? Sit down and never get off the couch, binge 48 straight hours of Yellowstone and Netflix, necessarily. Meaning it
yeah,
doesn't mean what is it all for? So just throw your hands up and
right,
don't pursue anything. Unless
right.
that's exactly what is your most fulfilling.
Yeah, right.
No, and for some
Right.
people, that's exactly what it is. So, like,
Yeah.
that's great. For those that we're coaching, it's a prompt to be helpful. What
Yeah.
is it for? And
Yeah.
and um and then, as you and I know, thinking about our clients as creative, resourceful, and whole, some people at their eulogy want to be surrounded by the 1.4 million people that work for their global empire that is Amazon. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that, like, there are ambitions to some of our clients that they say that is what I want, whether they're at the funeral or not. My life is built to this goal of who I am and who I'm becoming and what I'm creating.
Mhm.
Not that Jeff Bezos is one of our clients, but it is different for each
Yeah.
person if they're honest
Yeah.
about
Well,
what they
and
want their eulogy to be. And I think sometimes we interpret that as a judging thing, like, oh, well, it means that my doting community will, will be, res- respecting and receiving and grieving me,
mhm.
small literal community. And sometimes people are okay with it being a different type of eulogy.
Yeah, I think where I was going as far as the nuances is understanding what you want versus the expectations of others.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's where it really gets like where ego can even come in, or we talk about, the different saboteurs. If you have a saboteur that is a pleaser, and so that is more of, you're kind of just looking for that constant accolade, and it's like, okay, well, that's a really great dopamine hit, to
Mm,
get like, oh, you're doing so good, you're doing so good. But if at the end of each day you're exhausted and you're not fulfilled in the other areas that are important to you, which is, you talk about the goal being like there's work goals, there's personal, there's life, you got to kind of integrate. It used to be that we could keep ourselves compartmentalized.
mm.
Anymore it's like there's no compartmentalizing. Like even since, especially since COVID, we're in our living rooms, we're like everything is integrated, everything is like one. So how do you kind of really, we talked the last time we were on this together about the power of silence or isolation, or having that alone time, right? So it's kind of like, how do you sit with yourself and say, get the noise out, get all of the expectations of everybody else out, and what is it that I'm really working towards. And because if you're living somebody else's dream or somebody else's expectation, at some point it's going to get kind of like, ugh, empty.
Mm, mm.
Or, things are going to just start to not feel so great, you know? So
Well,
that,
yeah,
I think there's a lot of work there.
one of the words that one of my HR acquaintances talks about is harmony,
Yeah, I
work
like
life
that word.
harmony within his organization. And it's really it's probably the nicest word I've heard, because you do want that harmony. And that harmony can sound different or be a different set of instruments for everyone. It's
Hmm.
harmonizing. Is it an a cappella harmony? Is it a
Hmm.
harmony from a symphony? Is it strings? Is it percussion?
Yeah,
And that's really an important journey for everyone to take. And to your very point, to really be truly honest with what creates that harmony and fills up fulfills them, fills up their
yeah,
cup. We used to say to our daughters, you're filling up my cup.
yeah,
But what really helps fulfill you? I mean, personally, and I feel very judged by this, and I try not to tell people, and maybe I'm not being judged, but like, I hate vacations. I know we've talked about this,
hmm,
and like I've said, like, I hate them.
yeah.
It's just
I'm not judging you with that. Like, I come from a family
no,
that, like, my dad just wants to, like, never leave the house and stay on the farm, so it's like,
which is why we
yeah.
need him on the podcast. Another shout out why we need Mr. Veal
Yes.
on the podcast. This is why I want to talk to him, because I know I want to hear from him about the. But and shout out to Jerry Seinfeld once again, after I expressed this, and I've expressed this for several years, about
Yeah.
my dislike of vacation. Seinfeld was on Jimmy Fallon and recently did a great rant about how he hates vacation. And
Yeah.
my reason for hating vacation, he was talking about jet skis being the ride that just goes nowhere and you're back in a half hour.
Yeah.
But it's really because I love my life.
Well, and you know
And
what?
sometimes I've loved it before, but I really love it now. And it's a silly thing to say, I don't ever want to go on a vacation. Certainly I like taking time off, etc. But so it's
Yeah.
not so much that I would never take time off. I'm being a little melodramaculous here, dramatic. But that's something that I understand is not often, when you tell other people that, it
Yeah.
elicits a reaction where it's like, well, how can that be right?
Well, this brings up a really cool point, Chris, because what we talk about, we're when we're doing leadership development and trainings, where our framework is around leading self, leading others, leading circumstances. And so, our conversation starting out is, first of all, get clear on what your goal is, what that end game is, right? And so you can identify, it's like, oh, I didn't get that new position. Okay, well, or that position that somebody else got. And it's like, well, would that have really been positive to what you really want? And it's like, no, it wouldn't have. But I don't want to not get it. You know what I mean? I don't want to not be considered for it or whatever. So it's like, okay, that's the ego talking. The ego wanted that other position, or the ego wanted, to be included in this, that, or the other. But as far as what is most important for you in your life, you're on the right path and you're still doing really great things. So that's like being clear on leading self, so you can kind of like not go into that, like, why did this happen, or blah, blah, blah. But then talking about leading others or being in the circumstance. I know that I'm one that I'm really working on, and have been for years, just the judgment. I really don't want to be in judgment. But that's one of the hardest things. I mean, that sucker pops up all the time. When you said one of the things that you're judged on is maybe not taking a vacation. So, yeah, I could say, "Well, Chris, come on, you need to rest." But I need to ask you, "Well, Chris, what's your goal?" Before I get judgmental,
Mm,
I need to ask you, what's your goal? And if you're kind of like, this is what I love to do, then it's not for me to judge,
mm.
right? Because my life is not your life. But we can, and the reason why that's important is to like catch those moments too, is that's a lot of energy exerted.
Mm.
People exert a lot of energy and anxiety and worry and things about others and other people's decisions. And oh, that's going to be this, that, or the other. And it's like, you know what? That's just who they are. Maybe that's who they are, you know? So, just in thinking about beyond ourselves, like the circumstances that and the discussions that we get into. And for you to also say, like, this is important to me and I don't care if anybody else is judging me. I care more about what fulfills me, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be named, the Seinfeld episode, but
Yeah.
couple of things also from Jerry Seinfeld recently is about that Marcus Aurelius stoicism of like, okay, if all these things are going to be gone that we're worried about,
Yeah.
what's the best thing to do? And that's to focus on what you're doing now
Yeah. In the
and
present.
in the present and focusing on that it's Seinfeld says, Marcus really says, and getting better
Yeah.
at being at that exact thing we're doing right now, right? Which
Yep.
what I just said is already in the past, and it's right
Yep.
now and right now and right now.
Right.
And just being right, what we would call sort of that mindfulness or being extremely
Hmm.
present in what we're doing. Right now, you and I are trying to
Right.
have the best conversation we can have today about
Right.
this topic and that we're going to share with others and to focus on that. And a couple of thoughts to what you just said. One is in addition to what's the goal, it's the more ambiguous question of just what's best. Now,
Yeah.
people, that's such a hard thing to ask people because it does go back to that age old fun HR topic. There are two HR topics that you never get out of. What's the dress code and where's the work life balance? And the thing about both of those things is that the only answer is what's best.
Yeah.
And it's so much more fun to deputize an organization more so with the work life balance and work life harmony than the dress code. The dress code was probably, a 20 years ago
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I
But
thought you were going to say parking as well. Like that
oh,
would
there
be.
we go. Yeah, parking too. Exactly right. What are the spots and what's open and what's available?
Yeah.
But for work life harmony, it was always that very challenging question for human resources. And we in our careers and watching our dear colleagues as they continue in their HR careers continue to try to policy their way through work life balance, work life
Right.
integration, work life harmony, I think is the best phrasing I've seen thus far. And you can't,
Yeah.
because it is an individualized
Very much so.
assessment as a creative, resourceful, and whole individual living one life on this planet. What's best for
Yeah.
you? And oh my goodness, if only the organization defining it perfectly could solve it for you. The organization
Mhm.
always giving you that job, even if you don't want it, but it's a half step up the ladder or it's a little bit more of a pat on the head. And those things fade away. And, both of us having recent high school graduates and still kids in academic
Yeah.
environments, it's one of the most challenging things to say, psst, there's no A in life.
Yeah.
There's no D in life.
Yeah.
It's just going to be what it's going to be. And so
Yeah.
I think that sometimes that can take decades following your academic career to be like, oh, but that job that was offered to the person next to me is probably more like an A, and I
Yeah.
like A's. Or I
Yeah.
like trophies,
Right.
or I like accolades.
Right.
And it's
Right.
only when you really figure it out that you're like, oh, thank goodness I'm where I want to be, and no one's clapping.
Yeah.
No one's congratulating. No one's
Yeah.
trophizing, if that's a word. No one is
Yeah.
grading. because
And that
that's
doesn't, I mean,
truly what it
I
is.
don't think that starts to happen until about like
Ah!
midway through life, like unfortunately, but we'll see. I tell you, I love that you're bringing up the Jerry Seinfeld, but more so the Marcus Aurelius, because just in my own journey, I mean, going back and listening to the Stoics, and reading about, all the just reading more stoicism or whatever, it's like it really hasn't changed. Like that is the best.
Yeah.
That those teachings are, and we've just kind of been like reiterating it for how many, hundreds of years later. But it's kind of simple.
But not
So we'll have to
easy.
put Marcus Aurelius and some of his, some links to his work in the notes. But it's it's some great teachings. I think
Yeah.
it's exactly what we're talking about.
Right. And my final Seinfeld reference for today is that it goes to your point about advice or energy or concerning ourselves with the mission or individuality of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he says, if you ever pass two homeless guys, one guy's giving the other guy advice.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Right.
but right, we're always in everyone else's like, hey, whoa, 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 you can't do that, or you
Yeah.
should do this, or you should focus here. And it is, oh,
Right.
so well intentioned, so wonderfully beneficent, so loving, so concerned. That's where most of it comes from.
Yeah.
This is not, including with the two dudes that are talking on the side of the road, by the way. It is
Right.
all well meaning and yet probably mostly irrelevant.
Exactly. I mean, that's why when we talk about coaching, right? Coaching is like very little of it is us talking. We should not be talking because there's nothing, we're just there to provide the space and the opportunity to, work through things through different practices and kind of reflect, the mirror back, because what I've done in my life is not going to be, even if the circumstances are like extremely similar, it's still going to be different. So, you can share. I mean, it's not bad to hear examples or, experiences of others, but I've said this a number of times to people. I'm like, don't take the advice of somebody else that is just sharing still you know, their
Yeah, lived experience.
issue or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And this is where we get to those powerful short questions.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yes.
What is best
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah.
And that's where we have to give the space for that contemplation
Yeah.
to occur because it it is a question, both of those questions, and there are
Yeah.
many more that require real thought.
Yeah.
And that's where
That's what I
you
was
as a
going to say. It
coach,
takes asking that question a couple times, right? Because once you start really becoming more and more aware, and kind of listening to what the intuition, what's coming up within you, it's actually super powerful and super cool. Like, I mean, if you can just zone in and be and kind of like be in that quiet space and get asked that question, something will be popping up inside of you. And if you listen to it, but a lot of times you'll let the other voices, the other expectations, the boss's expectations, the parents' expectations, the spouse's expectations come in, because they'll be coming in just as quickly. But if you really, listen to what's coming in with up for you, the answer is there. We just don't allow it to come up because we're so crazy busy and distracted with everything else.
and it's layered to your point.
Yes.
It's layered.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll get an answer to that that will be something like my true self all the time. What's best
Yeah.
for you or what do you want to be? And then the question is, what does that mean to you? Right.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to take off.
Yeah.
I think you've described it sometimes as like someone coming in with like 7 puffy jackets on, right? And you got to
Uh-huh.
unzip that big one and then the next. And, you know,
Yeah.
to really get to the essence of what it is. And one of the goals we have on the podcast is to demystify coaching and to share the essence of what it is. And this is one of my favorite conversations and podcasts we've had recently because this is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that is so effective because the moment it's about the fact that, you know, you had a similar lived experience or similar professional experience, those things are all helpful, and they
Yeah.
certainly help comfort our clients to get in the room with the 7 coats on.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
as
I mean, I'm entering into a coaching engagement now where I have some stuff, you know, like I know a particular situation and dynamic and, you know, all of this. And I had to kind of like center myself as a coach and say, and this is why it's kind of this whole conversation has kind of come up because I'm like, okay, the only way to really be with this individual and be their coaching partner is to be extremely clear on what the goal is. Because then that's our North Star. That's our anchor that we like kind of like latch into. And we keep going back to that. So, because it would be very easy to be like, well, what about this? And then, oh my God, this happened. And, you know, and it's like, that doesn't matter. That's not helping you towards the goal that we've established in this coaching engagement. So
mm,
that's such an important part of setting up what we call the container and being clear on what is it that you want to get out of this experience that we're, you know, spending this time together.
and just to be clear about the value, because we've talked about how we're not just coaches, but we've benefited from being coached ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's that, you know, using my coat analogy, it's that one, you recognize when you're putting those 7 coats back on or however many.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're able to stay with just 1 coat or 2 coats afterwards.
Yeah.
And you understand, oh, there's a zipper in the front and I can
Yeah.
take this off and I
Yeah.
understand what this armor is. And I'm mixing metaphors right now, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but it does create a new level of knowing yourself and a new level of awareness that allows you to receive the stimuli of the world in a different way and to be able
Hmm.
to process it faster and to be able to address life
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
honestly better. And it has made a material difference
Yeah.
to our clients, to ourselves, and it's just worth saying that. It's not just for the sake of, okay, I came into this warm room and now I've taken the 7 coats off.
Yeah.
It is about getting to the essence so that you can be more satisfied
Yeah. And
and more
I want to
connected.
say too, like, we're not alone. Our listeners aren't alone. You know, it's actually, I think it's funny. I don't think I've ever said the puffy jackets, but it's usually the coats of armor, right? You know, like it's another Brene Brown, reference of peeling
My
back the armor.
my
But
puffy jacket, yeah, my
yeah.
puffy jacket is another Seinfeld reference. It's all Seinfeld references.
Yes, you got the Seinfeld, I got the Brene Brown. But you don't even realize like the first like as you're going through like you know getting your degree and your education and all of that and then you're just in this performing state. You know, you're just on this like steep trajectory for most people like just like taking in and as you're taking in that experience, pieces of armor, you know, are also kind of going on because you're just kind of like, I don't know, this person is putting me in this, you know, this feels good. I'm going to go this direction, you know, so, and you don't realize that all of a sudden you just packed on all this stuff and you get it. Usually I say it usually takes something and hopefully it's nothing horrible, you know, but
Mm.
something that kind of like makes you say, this is just not working anymore. And so then the rest of life is slowly taking all of that off. But what's cool is like you build, you can actually, if you're really focused on it, that is building up those mental muscles. As you take the armor off, it's building up mental muscles. So then you can recognize it, because you might put a jacket back on and then it's like, uh-oh, like it's time for me to take it back off. You have to just kind of keep being checked in with yourself. So it's all good. It's all learning experience and it's all life. It's just, I think the biggest thing is like being tuned into what is most important and just always asking yourself what that is. What is important to you, not all the other people that are in the stands.
Well, what I've learned is that from our conversation today is you start to put on these coats of armor, and then it starts to weigh you down, and
Yep.
then you're carrying around anvils of weight, and you
Yeah.
just said, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to lighten that load. If you're open to it, if you want that, or you can sink with the weight and the
Yeah.
anvil, and
Yeah.
it it is a choice
Right. Absolutely.
to pursue, not
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
sometimes you put down the
Sometimes
anvil,
people say, it's too uncomfortable. It's too vulnerable. I'm just going to keep powering through. Okay.
and it's not guaranteed that it's going to feel lighter all the time,
Yeah.
or that you're not going to have to then pick up another anvil, or that they
Right.
don't put the circumstances, life,
Right. Right.
the universe doesn't then pack on more. It doesn't
Right.
mean that. It's not just this like never ending journey upward into euphoria.
Right.
It just means that there's an opportunity to
Yeah.
pursue the lightning,
Yeah.
lightening, not lightning,
Yes.
lightening of the load. Well, Amanda,
Uh,
final words for today.
oh gosh. I mean, the thing that's popping up for me is just in all of this, being in the now, being in the present. So I think that's the other thing that I've seen is, thinking so much about, well, I want to, this, that, or the other. And it's like, oh my gosh, life changes so quickly that just think about, what it is that is fulfilling you now on that path to whatever that end game is.
Well said.
How
Thank
about
you.
you?
I agree. Focusing on the present.
Yeah.
Right? That's why it's the precious gift.
Which is a lot harder than, I mean, that should be easy, but I think it is one of the hardest things that anybody has to do. So I think we'll
Indeed.
that'll be our final message together, because I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
As for our listeners, we look forward to talking with you again soon. Until then, lead well, my friends.
And stay true to you. Bye bye.